what I have is I actually have a list that I've made for myself to remind myself of the things that I can do, right? That I love to do. So I think the important thing is, whatever is on the list is whatever floats your boat. It's like whatever makes you happy, whatever lights you up. And that is different for everybody.
Welcome to Some Stutter Law, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about living with communication disorders. It is a production of the Communication Collaborative. My name is Greg O'Grady. I'm a person who stutters and your host. Some Stutter Law aims to rebuild confidence and hope for people who live with communication differences by dismantling myths, stigma, stereotypes, and barriers. For more information about the Communication Collaborative or for this podcast, you can find us at somestutterlaw.ca. Today, Some Stutter Law welcomes Paige Smith and Jessica Deluce. Paige is a person who stutters and a certified professional coach who lives in Toronto, Ontario. Through her own personal journey to the other side of stuttering, Paige offers one-to-one coaching in a 12-week program called the Happy Stutterer Mindset. She helps people who stutter to better understand and support themselves so that they can heal from toxic emotions and negative self-talk, which tends to go hand in hand with the experience of stuttering. During her personal free time, Paige enjoys arts and crafts, antiquing, and science fiction movies. Jessica completed her undergrad at Wilfrid Laurier University in Business with a specialization in human resources. She currently works as a senior HR generalist for Moffat and Powell Rona. She has been accepted into the Queen Smith MBA program and will be attending in January 2023. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Jessica is also a young entrepreneur and a person who stutters, who seeks to establish a not for profit foundation to help raise money for people who stutter that cannot afford speech therapy. Jessica has officially applied and paid for the trademark status of the Well Spoken Foundation. Congratulations.
Thanks.
As previous Some Stutter Law guests, as people who stutter, I was so impressed with the importance that Paige and Jessica has placed on their individual self-care journeys to help find peace of mind, find clarity, embrace and befriend their stuttering. I invited them back to share and discuss their individuals' journeys towards self-care. Self-care for many people who stutter is a foreign area. I feel when people who stutter neglect the importance of self-care, we have the potential of becoming casualties of stuttering. Only through education, insight, and understanding of the importance of self-care can people who stutter ask the important question, what can I do and what support do I need to begin this journey towards self-care? So welcome Paige and Jessica. What do we mean when we talk about people who stutter and self-care? Do you want to share your thoughts on that?
Paige, why don't you go first?
Sure. Yeah. Self-care is, it's not just for people who stutter. I mean, it's really, if you're alive, if you are a human being, I believe that, self-care is just really part of what it takes to have a good life. And really, self-care is about taking care of yourself.
Mhm.
Um, and and what that is to so when you take care of yourself, then you can take care of other people as well. um, and I guess that one of the key things about self-care is believing that you are worthy to care for yourself. And I think that touches on one thing. Definitely, I know as a person who stutters in the past, there's a lot of low self esteem that can come, with that experience of stuttering.
Yeah, I think um, the pandemic, unfortunately, has been horrible for many people for many reasons. But the one thing I appreciate, if that's a weird thing to say or not, is how self care has really been such an important factor throughout it. Because everyone's been under so much stress in their own ways, and rightfully so. It's been a really hard few years. And so, just to emphasize what Paige said, self care is for anyone and everyone who needs it. We all deserve it in our own way, in our own shape and form. It can be as little as reading a book before bed each night, or it can be a lot as to going for a run or going to the spa if that's what you choose to do. Um, but definitely for myself as a person who stutters, it's very important that I continue my self care practices because that is what is the deciding factor from my perspective for my fluency, for how I use my targets. It really is the fundamental kind of property to how my day and how my journey goes. So it's a really important tool, and I'm thankful that the pandemic really has brought forward the importance of it for everyone. But to Paige's point, people who stutter really should reflect on their own self care and whether they do it, because it could make a world of a difference if they aren't practicing it.
Mm. Jessica and Paige, would you share your own personal journeys now towards self care? I mean, when did you realize the importance of self care as a person who stutters? So, Jessica or Paige?
Um, so my self care journey probably started probably in my teens. At that point in time, I kind of hit a plateau with my speech therapy. I had all of my tools and targets, and I had this great kit of fluency techniques. And what it came down to, being a 14, 15, 16-year old teenager, um, was all of the external elements around me. So socially, academically, friends, family, dating, like all of that fun stuff as a teenager that you go through. And if I didn't get a good sleep, if I wasn't drinking enough water, if I wasn't fueling my body, um, exercise has always been something really important to me. I grew up playing hockey, soccer, I danced. So if I wasn't taking care of myself in the external ways, then I knew that my fluency would not be as good that day. So my speech therapist, very early on, really embedded in me, what am I doing outside of my targets that will support me? And the one thing I forgot to mention in that is my positive self talk, and writing my affirmations and really putting out what I'm grateful for into the world. It's little things like that that really have supported my self care journey.
So for me, I'm going to come from it at a different angle because I have to say, um, I think I had lots of other things going on. My younger self was definitely not healthy. That was on many levels. And one way that it did come out very anti self care was that at 16 years of age, I started to smoke. And I think that so I had, more issues than just stuttering. And I really can see the fact that, with all these other things kind of in the way, um, smoking was kind of, it just manifested for other things. And, you may be thinking, okay, what does smoking and stuttering have to do with each other? But actually, it has a lot. And so I have to actually say, the first moment I actually started to take care of myself was when I stopped. So when I tried to quit smoking and when I finally did stop smoking. And so um, that was a process and it didn't happen overnight. But I have to say I've been now smoke free for 13 years.
Wow,
Mm,
that's awesome.
mm. Congratulations.
Thanks. Thanks. And so really, I have to say that I think that was because I think it's a holistic approach that for me, if you're working on one area, um, if I was feeling unhealthy in other ways, and smoking is a big part of it, like it was very unhealthy. So I think that was kind of my gateway into taking care of myself. So I came at a different way. And I think, you know, what I really think is that the reason why I started um, smoking, or that aspect of it, is that, it's not a healthy thing to do. But I think I realized when you are in a place of pain, when you're coming from pain, and especially in my case, pain of stuttering,
Mhm.
because it was a painful experience. And so I find that when we are in that state, we tend to seek out things that give us a sense of pleasure. But in the end, that smoking, everyone talks about, it is a sense of pleasure. You wonder how, but there is, but it's really a false sense of the of of pleasure. And so what it really caused me was more pain. Um, and that it was actually just putting more stress onto my body, because really once you have that cigarette, it's really you're waiting for that next hit, right? So your body was always in a state of stress. um, so it makes me, part of me is kind of sad that at that time, my younger self, I did not love myself enough to take care of myself. But when I did, I made the decision to make that change. I mean, everything else then changes after that. And change is easier said than done. But really, I want to leave one thing is saying that there is a shift where, in order for me to make that change, was really had a mantra. I had a mantra for myself, and it was, I want to be healthy and happy. And to be
Mm,
honest, at that time, I had no idea what that meant. Like, I definitely did not feel healthy. I did not feel happy. But I know there's a part of me that desired something better for myself. And so every day I use that mantra as, whenever I had to make a choice, I ask myself, will this help me be healthy and happy?
Mhm.
mm.
And that really made things clear. So, if it was no, then it was easy to say no. And if it yes, then I was able to support myself in a healthy way so that I could start to be happy.
You know, Paige, just thinking now, I actually really like your mantra, striving towards healthy and happy. It lends itself to my next question. When people who stutter neglects the importance of self-care, we have this potential of becoming, as I mentioned earlier, casualties of stuttering, which I
Mhm.
consider the dark side of stuttering, the
Yeah.
anxiety, all the negative emotions below the stuttering iceberg. How do people who stutter prevent ourselves from becoming casualties of stuttering, allowing ourselves to succumb to the below the surface of the stutter iceberg feelings?
For me, something that I always remember, and I feel like I have it embedded, and it's a slogan that I don't know. I really feel passionate about is what I have to say is worth saying. And I think everyone, that applies to everyone. Everyone has a fundamental, I guess, resource of communication. We're all born with it in a variety of different capacities. Um, and whether that's v- verbal, oral, we all have a right to communicate because what we have to say is worth saying. And I think it's really important that people who stutter remember that because they're just as special as everyone else on this planet, and they should be proud to keep communicating. That to me is what it just comes down to.
I'd like to start off with a quote to answer this question, because I think it ties back to, where do all of those feelings come from, right? Like, where do all those, like, negative or dark or bad feelings that we have? And I came across this proverb, and it's really stuck with me, and I want to share it here. It's a Chinese proverb, and what it is it says, "Tension is who you think you should be. Relaxation is who you are."
Hmm,
Hmm.
I like that.
Yeah, makes sense. Paige,
Hmm.
makes sense.
So I think, a lot of the tension that comes from having a stutter is, we get a lot in our head, a lot of the ideas, the thoughts that, like, that we're trying to be for other people, or for ourselves as well. And it's the idea of that should, it creates that tension. And behind that should, there's the fear, there is the anxiety, it creates all these other feelings. But when you come from a place of, to know that relaxation is who you are. So being, so if you be who you are, be just true to yourself, um, relaxation will come with that.
Hmm. When we're talking about people who stutter in self-care,
Hmm.
listening to you both, we're also talking about mental health, a positive approach to mental health. So, how important is this distinction, understanding for people who stutter, self-care and mental health?
They really go, in my opinion, for people who stutter, they really go hand in hand because a lot of the self doubt comes from sometimes just the disbelief, the bullying, kind of all of the external factors that can be brought onto someone who stutters. And I don't think a lot of people realize, and just like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people maybe haven't realized self care until the pandemic. That self care really is mental health. And sometimes people may not need to say affirmations to themselves in the mirror. Sometimes it's just going on a walk, but that walk is a full 360 because that walk will release endorphins that will support and relax mental health. So I really feel that they go quite closely. And unfortunately, people who stutter, we've all been through the bullying aspect, and of course, that can seriously impact one's health. And I think that when someone is able to really gain control and be able to have a handle on their mental health, in the sense that they have the ability that, should they have a negative experience, they know how to kind of find light and see through it. It really can make a world of a difference.
When it comes to mental health and stuttering, yeah, as Jess Saka was saying, that definitely they go hand in hand, and really, how we feel really stems from our thoughts,
Mhm.
and so it's really the type of thoughts that you have, and definitely the pandemic really brought up a lot of thoughts for people that were like, we don't know what's going on, and all this uncertainty, and that brings fear, and it's like this cycle. um, so, self care is really important. The one thing is to really, tap into that healthier mental health, is really a way to do that is through the body. And so one way to do that, the body, a lot of self-care practices is, acts of self-care, like, take a bath or go for a walk, or anything that, really works for you. And it could be working out, all that kind of thing, because really, I like to share another quote that I have with me here, that's really sticks with me. And I have to say, I've struggled myself being physically active and doing all those things. I get stuck in my head. It's not, once you master it, you've always mastered it. It's like almost every day you're starting, like it's a daily practice. But what I want to get to is, there's this quote I heard, and it's like, all the mental health really comes around because there's a lot of anxiety, um, that you have, but it's really in your body. But this quote is about saying, an anxious mind cannot live in a relaxed body. So the way
Mm.
to get through to that place of clarity, or having feeling better, it's really through those acts of self-care that are really through your body.
Hmm. So, Jessica and Paige, so what we're saying really is that it's so important for people who stutter to take the time to to listen to their bodies, to educate and understand the effects of stuttering has on one's mental health, one's body, physically, spiritually, emotionally. It really is a is shows how important commitment people who stutter need to make to their self care. And this is a huge commitment, as I mentioned before. Self care is so foreign to a lot of people who stutter because we're so caught up in surviving the next speaking experience, surviving the next introduction. I want to talk a little bit about commitment to self care.
I laugh because I'm one of the crazies that got a Peloton through COVID. And so my self-care is, I get up between 5 and 5:30 every morning, and I jump on the live ride at 6 a.m. because I know it's live and there's other people doing it with me, and I know that, for me, I have a guilty conscience that if I miss that live ride, I'm gonna disappoint the thousands of people that don't know me, that for not being there. Um, so I started getting into that habit, and thankfully I'm a morning person, so it works. Um, but as well, on my phone, I have all of my social media and apps and whatever turned off. So as of 8:30 p.m., so my entire phone's on time limits, and except for my main communication apps. So, iMessage, WhatsApps, Slack, and things like that. Um, so if people still need to reach out to me, they can. But really getting into that kind of rotation has allowed me to really be present, especially right before I go to sleep. So I know I will have a good sleep, but as well, I'm getting those endorphins first thing in the morning when I wake up. So it does set my day off in a pretty good manner.
Mm.
For me, yeah, it's really important to commit to yourself and your self care. And, I can admit when life gets busy, I get very focused into what I'm doing. And once I get going, sometimes it's hard to stop. And I could just work, 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 work. Um, and so, but I know that I in the past I have had a tendency of burning out because of that. So I've it is definitely an intention. It's very much setting that intention and sticking to it and making a promise to yourself. Because I know I can see the difference. I can see the days when I, take the time in the morning. Part of my, when I am really on my self care is, reading a book in the morning that, is putting good thoughts into my mind. And I think it helps for the rest of the day because I feel sometimes if I don't put good thoughts into my brain, and I might be just on my own thoughts, sometimes you just go into that negative downward spiral, like with your own thoughts. So it's those little acts that really make a difference. And for one of those, that's definitely one of them.
Mm. So uh, when a person who stutters does not make does not make this commitment to self care, and I mean, there's as I mentioned earlier, there's lots of reasons for it because sometimes we're so caught up in just the day to day living
Yeah.
and communicating. It's almost like it really is. I feel a crisis within ourselves, and because we get so caught up being on this treadmill of survival that so what suggestions can you give people sort of to get off this treadmill of survival, the mentality, the negative mentality, to just to
I
calm the
really,
storm within, in other words.
yeah, I really believe it does take 90 days to form a habit. And I think, as weird as it sounds, almost micromanaging yourself, and really just having to put the effort in, to make a list and say you, you have to make time for yourself. And whether you literally have to put time in your work calendar, which I will admit, working in HR through a pandemic, I have sometimes have had to schedule time for myself because there has been some periods during the pandemic where, uh, because I oversee a lot of our COVID measures, my phone starts ringing at 6 in the morning and won't stop till 10 at night. So there are times where I literally have had to schedule me time, so I know I'm not on my work phone for the couple of hours. Um, but really just making a conscious effort to dedicate that time for yourself. The more you consciously do it, the more it will become unconscious, and you just get into a healthy habit of making that time for you.
So, Greg, you had mentioned about the, for a person who stutters, this crisis of, how did you mention it? It was the crisis with within
Yeah,
ourselves.
a crisis within ourselves because that's all part of becoming a casualty. Because when we're so caught up in this stuttering mentality, there's a definite tunnel vision and has nothing to do with self care. We're trying to people please, performance management, and so it's one sort of does not take the time or is aware of the time or me time to step off this mentality.
Mhm. If it's okay, I'd like to address that, as to how someone gets there. Um, would that be
Oh,
okay?
definitely, definitely, Paige.
So, because the one thing I've realized is, we all know what self care is, and all of the benefits of it. But I know for myself, when you're at that place, um, when you are in that when you are in that crisis mode, how did someone get there? And to me, that's been fascinating. And to me, I've looked at myself to know, well, why did I get, why was I where I was? And really, why I realized why I did not have self-care in my life was because I had a lack of nurturing in my childhood. And the reason why I bring this up is because I do feel stuttering, especially adults who stutter now. They may have had or may not have had things happen in their childhood that it still affects them now. But I know for myself that that lack of nurturing, when I did not see it, when I did not learn it for myself, um, I did not. So then I don't know how to nurture myself. But the thing is, it goes back to the fact is I wasn't nurtured because my mother wasn't nurtured. My mom lost her mother when she was 4 years old. And I started stuttering at 4 years of age. And so sometimes I wonder if the lack of nurturing really comes down to the fact that because I wasn't nurtured, I didn't know how to nurture myself. But I got to a place where when we do start to take those steps to nurture yourself and take self care, um, you are giving yourself maybe what you never got um, before. And the one thing is, it says, when your needs were not met in childhood, it could be like thinking that your needs do not matter, that I do not matter. And all this does tie back into um, speech, I believe, because if you have thoughts, even at a very young age, that you feel somehow you don't matter, you have a hard time to express yourself. And so for me, it's been really empowering to go back that far back into my childhood to understand why things happened. Because I really feel that when you understand yourself, you can support yourself. And really supporting yourself really is then self care.
Hmm.
So I feel like when this goes off a bit of a tangent, um, and I hope that, in sharing this, because I have to say that, there was a time in life when all I knew was how to feel bad. I didn't know how to feel good. And so I know it goes beyond stuttering, but I felt really, really bad about stuttering. And I felt really, really bad about lots of other things. But when I got stuck in that place of, when you're in that funk. And I've talked to other people who stutter, and they may have these episodes of feeling really bad and really feeling down. And really, I would get stuck and I'd be stewing in that place. So I want to, how do you bridge the gap
Hmm.
from where you are now to all of these wonderful ideas of self-care, because I feel like that's where people um, they don't I didn't know how to bridge the gap for a really long
Mhm.
time. And I think, that maybe it goes back to that mantra, the healthy and happy. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know, but I started to take steps, and really that's like just get moving, taking action, trying something what works for you. Um, something that lights you up. Self-care can take so many forms, but really at the end of the day, it's really you know, um, really coming to a place where you can love yourself in spite of like having a stutter.
Hmm. Do do you feel, Jessica and Paige, that I'm just listening to you. Well, listening to you both on how hard you both have worked on your journeys to realize that for you, Paige is the lack of nurturing, and I'm just wondering that entails a lot of grief as well, and that takes a lot of courage to really sort of reach the point that, aha, this is one of the reasons or variety of reasons our upbringing that contributes to how I feel about myself. And that takes a lot of courage to really sort of work through this process. And so, do you feel that there's a lot of grief that, and I mean, and this is a difficult journey to take on your own. Do you feel you need a lot of support?
Yes, and I really believe that that has helped me on my journey. Is it? I really feel like the health and happiness really started happening, 15, years ago or so, and that's really, I think, the part where the support I had different people come into my life. Like my husband has made um, a huge difference in my life where he was truly the person who I felt comfortable. I could say anything I wanted, and just someone there to listen to me truly in the way. And so and I have a favorite aunt and uncle. They're not my biological aunt and uncle, but they have become my aunt and uncle, and they play a huge role in my life. And um you're right, it's hard. I don't think healing happens in isolation. Healing happens through finding the connection with other people that truly where you feel truly supported.
Mm. And
Paige,
your
I just
thoughts,
want to
Jessica?
say, oh, I just want to share, like, Paige, you are like absolutely incredible. I know so many people that um, are can never come face with past past experiences, and they can never own up, and not own up, but face them and grow from them. And the fact that you have been able to do that and acknowledge it and be present with it and grow from it is just incredible. So, like, kudos and congrats. And I just think you are a fabulous person. So, I just want you to know that. Um, I think just from my own personal journey, and Paige and I have talked about this, just for context. Paige and I first met like 2020 virtually, right
Mm.
before I think the pandemic hit. Um,
Yep.
and we both shared each other's or our own stories to one another. And um, my stuttering journey is, to be totally honest, is much different than Paige's. I had parents that constantly worked with me on a weekly basis with my speech therapist. I have a twin brother that would protect me from anyone that bullied me. So I came from a very supportive environment with my speech. Um, and no one's journey is the same. My own journey with my speech was I was my own demon. I had the self doubt. My family and my close friends growing up, they always knew I could do it, but I was always my worst demon. And it was the kids that would bully me, not in front of my brother. Like it was just the self doubt. And I grew up on the tail end of the beginning of social media. So Hannah said MySpace, Facebook. So I was always comparing myself to these social media. So that was not good. It was not pleasant because I wanted to be like everyone else and I wasn't. So it really came down to just myself being able to face it and listen to what everyone else had to say about me, that I could do it. I was important. What I had to say was influential in its own way at 12 years old. Like it really took a lot of people kind of hitting me with a hammer, metaphorically, to really kind of elevate myself in my speech. Um, so yeah, that's just a little bit about my own experience.
Mm. Uh, you know, the more that the more that I'm listening to you both share your journeys, the word that comes to mind is this fear of abandonment, abandonment. And I think that in many, I feel in many, many ways, people who stutter that that are not aware of the importance of self-care, and because of our behaviors of trying to find recognition, acceptance externally, we tend to abandon ourselves. We put so much emphasis on trying to be accepted. Let's say the F word, for example, trying to be fluent all the time just for the sake of fitting in. And I think this is where we tend to abandon ourselves. And this is where that we need to get in touch with that key word, because the more I've been thinking about this episode, I've been thinking a lot about abandonment and the various forms that people started tends to abandon ourselves. You see, like
Mhm.
listening to you, Paige, about the nurturing and how you sort of realize that it may you may have felt abandoned back then. So what does that term come to mind? Abandonment.
Yeah, it's abandonment is a loaded word, It's because behind that there's this idea of so much pain, and yeah, I think behind abandonment is the fear of being rejected. And so I think once you've been rejected, um, you know, my earliest experience speaking was already a moment of being rejected by my peers in grade one. Feeling rejected, and when you're rejected, you are abandoned. You are, it's very hard for a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old to know how to adapt and to cope with that. And I think it gets impressed into our being, um, and until you can do the work to recognize where that's coming from, that's when you can truly get to a place where you can move past that fear. Because otherwise, if you don't do that work and address it now, you're always going to be faced with it again and again and again until you do. But I very much remember the fear of speaking to people, because the fear of being rejected, the fear they're not going to like me because I stutter, they're not going to like me because I take too much time, and all these things that tie up with that. But just um, then, yeah. So I think the thing is, whatever you learn as a child, you even subconsciously you learn that and you bring that into your adulthood, and and so then you might be projecting it your future onto your present experiences, or your future ones. And so it's I do believe, I've experienced that. I've had deep pain over that. Had to reconcile, work a lot through it. It's not easy, doesn't happen overnight, but I think to myself, um, that you know I you know I really do believe that I didn't have uh I wasn't really set up for success. Sometimes I feel like, but I feel like in spite of that, you can prevail. I feel like you can come to the other side. um so I hope that gives some sense of hope, that that the all of this is not, they're not states of that's it, like that there is, it's what am I trying to say, is a state where it's not absolute. We're very fluid. We can move and change and overcome anything that's in your way.
Hmm.
I think Paige really explained it well. Just circling back to your experience in grade one, like um, I mentioned it in our one-on-one podcast, Greg, that I would present only to the teacher at recess. Like I would be petrified. I would not put up my hand. There were a couple years where I would beg my parents to write a letter to my teachers for them not to call on me in class. Like it was the fear of being rejected by colleagues in my class, but not just that, just being laughed at in front of everyone was just not a feeling that I ever wanted to face. So I just kind of avoided for so long and just begged just to be invisible rather than be heard. Um, but when I think of the word abandonment now, being 27 as a person who stutters, what I'm petrified of, which is ironic because I feel they're so ingrained in me now after such extensive speech therapy growing up, is what will happen if I, for whatever reason, one day lose my targets? I lose my techniques I've learned. I've lost kind of, and I've abandoned all of the hard work that I have put in over the last 20 years. That to me petrifies me. And I think circling back to self care, um, that is what is so, and that is why it is so important, because you don't want to lose track of who you are and where you come from in the mix of everything going on in life. Something that I truly believe is I am more than my stutter. I am an HR professional. I am a future MBA student. I am Bernie and Karen's daughter. Like, there is so much more to me than my stutter. But sometimes, in the mix of how exciting and busy and overwhelming life can be, you forget sometimes about this influential part about who you are. And that's why I need to kind of reflect and do my self-care, because I can't forget about my fluency techniques and everything that supports my speech, because if I do, I worry about that day. So I want to make sure that that never happens.
Hmm. You know, another word that also came to mind, I mean, as I was thinking about abandonment, was self sabotage. The more that
Yes.
we abandon ourselves, even without knowing, the more that we try to performance management, people please. We're always sabotaging our self care without even knowing it. Even when go to make a phone call, all the anxiety within. When we try to introduce ourselves, even before all the anxieties, because I think the more, I mean, we have to listen to our bodies in terms of, as as you both were saying, you have to be in touch with your emotions. And so when I sort of have all this anxiety about answering the phone or making a phone call, make an appointment, this all this anxiety I interpret as being, this is one way I'm abandoning myself, and then I'm sabotaging my targets, things like that. Do you want to add a few words to uh, uh, sabotaging?
So I smile, Greg, because I, to this day, I still, which is ironic because I have a work phone. I hate answering the phone, and I would avoid it at all cost if I could. However, I get paid to answer a phone, so I don't have a choice. Um, but self sabotage, and you brought up a really good point about kind of the people pleasing side of things. That is me. I have trouble saying no. There's some really good books that I've read that are like the power of saying no, that um, I have enjoyed, and I need to really remind myself about what some of the lessons are from there. But sometimes I overfill my plate and I take on way too much, which in turn kind of sometimes will put down my self and care on a list of things to do. And then I just become so overwhelmed with everything going on that I will self destruct. Um, and it's usually not good because then, to Paige's point from her earlier, you do reach that point of burnout. Um, but I'm very fortunate with that said, in the sense that when it comes to presentations, talking in front of people, having difficult conversations where fluency may not be as high as it would be in a casual conversation, um, I've been fortunate in the sense that due to the job that I hold, I don't really have a choice. So as much as I would love to back out of a lot of things, like just for perspective, I do terminations, progressing discipline. I have a lot of difficult conversations because HR isn't always, rainbows and butterflies. It it's hard. It's really hard. So I don't have the option to hide, and I think forever be a little bit grateful for all of my experience doing this, because I think it's made my confidence, even though I get the anxiety about my speech always before, I know that it's going to better me in the long run. If that makes sense, I
Yeah.
don't know if it does, but
Actually, I want to add before I forget that, Greg, you probably may not know this, but Jessica and I both have something in common, and that is we both have a twin
yeah,
brother. So, what are the chances of
My
that?
God, it's amazing. So you both have twin brothers.
yeah, we
My
do.
God, that's quite something. You know.
Uh,
Yes, and oh, actually, the second thing too is that I think this is correct, but we were also premature
yes.
babies. So my brother and I, we were born September 25th, and we were not due until about November 15th, and so we were
Yeah.
preemies.
Oh my God, that's quite something. Okay. This, I'm just thinking now. This also calls for some research. Has anybody suggested research being done?
Well, I have read that stuttering can be more common among twins. My twin also had speech development, um, not problems, but difficulties as his language skills were developing. But mine was much more severe than his.
Hmm.
Yeah, and to add that, I actually know of another, person who stutters, and she also, in my very small world here, she also has a twin brother as well, and so I feel like, is there something there?
Mm-hmm. You really wonder about that, It's like like my family. There's six boys and one girl in my family, and four of the boys stutter. And my father
Wow.
stuttered. My sister doesn't stutter. So really, there's four boys that stutter. So I mean, this one questions genetics here as well. Okay. Well,
Well,
ladies, this has been a great episode, and there's so much more to talk about self care because I mean, I still have lots of questions, and I'm thinking, many people who stutter, we know, you know, we know intellectually that how important it is to acknowledge self care and to work towards it, but just to admit it emotionally, that's a challenge as well. You know, going going from the intellectual to the emotional, and just working through all the emotions, and that takes a lot of courage. And so so I really you know I really applaud you both for all the work that you've been doing on your own personal self care. I'm wondering now, when you one last question, when you have your bad experiences, maybe like a stressful situations or speaking situations, when you're leading towards the dark side of stuttering, you know
Mhm.
what messages do you tell yourself?
well, you bring up a good thing about, yeah, because there are those days when something happens, you might feel bad, and probably the last thing that comes to mind is to do something for yourself. So I've actually learned that the best thing is to prepare yourself. So have what I have is I actually have a list that I've made for myself of to remind myself of the things that I can do, right? That I love to do. Um, and so I think when you have that ready, because when you are emotional, your logical mind goes offline, right? And so you're not going to think about those solutions that you could do. So I think the important thing is, whatever is on the list is whatever floats your boat. It's like whatever makes you happy, whatever lights you up, and that is different for
It is.
everybody. Um, and I think that be selfish, be selfish in whatever that may be. I know, once I started to acknowledge and to validate my true, um, those things that light me up, as I said, it really helps you start to feel good.
Hmm.
I think the only thing I can add on, because Paige answered that beautifully, honestly, is I think what it comes down to, if people are ever in like a real pinch and they're starting to panic themselves, just breathe.
Yeah.
It's the most fundamental thing. Just breathe. My breath control is something that I have also had to work on quite extensively. But just taking a deep breath and holding it at the top for 4 seconds and letting it go, that is sometimes all it takes for me in any panic situation. And for the most part, it works. So,
Mhm. It is so true because many people who stutter that we don't realize that it's okay to take care of ourselves. It's
mhm,
okay to self love ourselves, and because I think we need to start respecting ourselves, because the more that we have a feeling of being abandoned, or the more that we feel that we're sabotaging ourselves, we have to look for the triggers. For example, that many of us are always apologizing through being workaholics, being volunteer holics, things like that. So we're overextending ourselves. It's like we're always apologizing. So I think it's so important for us to really step off the treadmill and just to say it's time for me, as you both were saying, it's me time, it's me time.
yes,
And also surrounding ourselves with people who are supportive of
yeah,
us. And the most important is to know who is supportive and who aren't supportive, you know?
hmm
Yeah, because I think many of us tend to make excuses for people's behavior, you know?
yeah, yes.
But anyhow, ladies, thanks again for coming back to some sort of law. And do you both feel that there should be more in the media about self care? People starting self care. Do you think there's more need for that?
Now, is this specific to people who stutter or just in a general basis?
I'm focusing more on people who stutter.
Yeah, I think people think it's just speech therapy, but I think stuttering is a holistic um, thing that we need to work on. And absolutely, I think people need to be reminded that taking care of themselves and his speech therapy.
Hmm.
Hmm, I would totally agree with that. That is perfectly said.
Okay, so listen, so we'll one more thing before I leave. Paige, I was noticing your vision board behind you. You want to share a little bit about your vision board?
Yeah, so my vision board behind me is really for the happy stutterer. And, it's all the quotes and, happy images and things that inspire me, it's bright colors. And, I'm a visual person. And so I need those happy things around me to really feed me. Because I do find when things are tucked away, or if they're really out of sight, out of mind. So what this does is really keeps it top of mind for me, and because a lot of the things on the board are things that I try to live by, right?
Mm,
And I think they start, those words start to become integrated into yourself, into your being. And so I think words are very powerful, and then the visuals as well tie together really, really in a powerful way for me.
mm. Just to just to let the listeners know that I attended Paige's one of Paige's workshop on it was a few months ago on developing. What was the name of the workshop again, Paige? I'm trying to remember.
It was a vision board workshop for people who stutter, and it was to use your imagination to speak with
Yeah.
confidence.
Well, I remember when Paige first brought this to my attention. I thought to myself, I was very skeptical, extremely skeptical. And I said, I've never done a vision board. Now, what is it all about? And so I was questioning whether or not I should attend, but I thought to myself, well, I've never stepped down from challenge, but I was very thankful to actually attend to that workshop because I actually I bought my own markers, the magazines, made my own vision board, and Paige was an excellent workshop, excellent, and I highly recommend it for any person who stutters because just thinking about just envisioning all this positive energy, it made me feel so much better about myself as a person who stutters. So thank you very much, thank you. And so thanks again, Jessica, and thank you both. And we, well, I'm sure that we will continue this self-care discussion.
Absolutely.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much.
Take care now.
Bye.
Some Stutter Love is hosted by Greg O'Grady. It is produced, recorded, and edited by Paul De Decker, as well as Luca Dinu, who, by the way, wrote this jazzy theme music. Leah Bugden and Alicia Megison command our pages on Instagram and TikTok. Editing assistance was provided by the Labrador Languages Preservation Laboratory, or Labradory, at the Memorial University of Newfoundland. You can listen to or subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and Spotify. Video versions of each episode are found on our YouTube page. Some Stutterla is a production of the Communication Collaborative. Thanks for listening.